I'm talking today with my daughter Isabel and Gray Chapin. Both Izzy and Gray are sisters to a sib with Sanfilippo syndrome. They are both also very gifted writers who have used the written word to understand their sibling experience. I'm really glad that you're both here to give the sibling a voice in our Writing is Healing series for Courageous Parents Network. So thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, happy to be here.
Izzy, do you think of yourself as a writer? Because I think of you as a writer. As your mom, I think of you as a very professional writer, but what are your thoughts?
I think I've always thought of myself as a writer, and I think sort of the line of distinction for that is, like, even when I was writing in a journal or a diary, it was always sort of with the idea in mind that I would eventually share it with someone. You know, if I was writing a poem, I would know that I wanted to share it with, you know, my best friend after I finished writing it. And I think it's that aspect of sort of like having an audience in mind being what I think of as defining me as a writer.
I feel like I'm kind of the opposite. Like, maybe I consider myself a writer now just with the website, but whenever I would write before the Blair connection, like, I didn't really consider myself a writer because I'm like the opposite. I wasn't really sharing it with anyone. It was more like, kind of like you were talking about, just like a dump of words, and it wasn't like as professional. So maybe I consider myself a writer now, maybe just a blogger. I don't really know, but I don't think I would.
So what do you mean a writer versus a blogger?
I think that just since I'm like publishing stuff on my website, I feel like it's more of blogging and like sharing more like recent like events and like how I'm feeling than like writing like a poem or like something more like professional and like formatted.
As someone who's like studied writing and is an English major at a university, I sort of have a certain standard for myself when I'm writing. So I think that even if I'm writing something like a blog, I have a sort of format in my mind that it should follow. And so I would still consider blogging professional writing. Like, yeah, it tends to be more casual and like not as like style centered, but I would still consider what you do, Gray, as like professional writing. I mean, cool. I think it's all up to yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Do you feel more inspired to write, Gray, because you have a purpose? And what is your purpose behind the blog? Like when you sit to write something for the Blair Connection, what are you trying to accomplish?
I definitely feel like I have more of a purpose of writing now that I have the Blair Connection, because I used to like journal and do that kind of thing, but it was never really something that I could like keep up with. And it was more just like, you know, in like complicated times I would journal, but it wasn't something that I do every day or every week. But now that I have the website, it's kind of like there's more people relying on me to like post. And I'm like, you know, I have that set for myself that I'm posting once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever it is. And so I feel like I have more of a purpose writing. And then I also feel like I kind of write differently for my website than I used to do when I was journaling, because I feel like I have to kind of add like a resolution at the end or like something that's sort of motivating a little bit. And it's less like, I wouldn't say it's less realistic, but it's just more meant for other people like read than for myself to like express myself. But it still acts in both ways.
That's actually interesting, Gray. You said earlier that you feel like your writing has changed because now you feel like you have to have a message or a resolution involved. And I've always felt that writing sort of offered this weird paradox opportunity where I knew that I wanted to work towards a message in some way. And oftentimes that sort of external goal helped me find the message for myself, you know, where I might not have realized what a certain like event or feeling that I had on that day meant until I tried to put it in words for a greater purpose. And so I think in a lot of ways, just like trying to reach that goal every time that I was writing helped me think about the bigger picture that was going on in my life. A lot of times when I was younger and I would write, it would be about very simple daily things, you know, why I had to work really hard to be allowed to take Ben on a walk around the block on my own, you know, and what that sort of meant to me and to my relationship to him was something that I remember writing about.
I completely agree with what Izzy said about like when you're trying to find a resolution for like maybe your audience or for like that purpose, it also makes you realize the same thing. So like I just recently wrote a blog about like an incident in school where like my like grief was brought up, and I was like writing it. When I got to the end of the blog, I was like, this is not a good ending to this. Like I can't think of anything positive that came out of it, but like I had to think about it for a few days, and then I like came up with something, and it really made me realize like, okay, maybe this wasn't like all bad. And I agree with that it definitely like makes you realize like certain things have positives to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that before, definitely in regards to like whenever I'm reading other people's writing. You know, maybe I'll read a piece about someone's, you know, great aunt or someone who's passed away and sort of their grief over that circumstance. And I've had moments where it sort of makes me angry in a way. And then I have to sort of sit back when I'm writing about that and think about, you know, why am I angry that this other person it like feels like this is such a momentous thing for them, and how do I treat other people's grief in relation to my own grief, and sort of, I don't know, bridging that gap, and understanding my own emotions, and then sort of like calming down a little bit through writing.
I'll have
Very
people
helpful.
from my school like message me after posting something and be like, this really helped me because my like grandpa passed away. And sometimes it's like frustrating because like, I mean, I'm glad that my website helps those people too, but it's just hard to like think about, you know, we had to go through something so much more like that affected us a lot more. And it's hard to like think about this is the like most difficult thing that's happened to another person in their life.
So when I would go to share pieces that I had written on, again, largely for Ben's dream, right, and what we were doing, I did, like you guys, feel a little bit of a pressure to have it come to some positive ending. And sometimes a lot of the things I never shared were because I couldn't find that positive ending, because I just wanted to write down the raw emotion, the raw thing. And so I'm going to ask you, as siblings, should we just be sharing the raw stuff? Or do we feel a pressure as writers to clean it up?
I mean, obviously we feel that pressure, but I have thought, I'm not really sure if I clean it up for the siblings reading it or for like, you know, my parents or my family or my friends who are reading it, because sometimes it's like, I don't want, you know, my friends at school to think that I'm like struggling this much and I can't, like, there's nothing positive coming out of this. So sometimes I wonder, I don't know if I'm not sharing the raw part of it for them, or if it's, you know, I think that the raw part would probably help siblings. And I've thought about on my website maybe making a certain section just for siblings that is more raw, because I think that would help, but sometimes it can be really hard to share that part.
So I would push back against the idea that like having a resolution or a message at the end doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be positive. If you understand something about yourself or about your situation by the time you get to the end of writing, I think that's a beneficial thing, whether it's a recognition of anger or sadness or some sort of other negative emotion. It can be helpful no matter what the like level of positivity is. And I think to some degree we should try to stop ourselves sometimes from just sticking to those positive, happy-go-lucky, we can take this away from the situation, because it's tough to be a sibling and not feel like your reality is represented properly in other people's writings and the resources that are available to you. So I think it is important for us to share the raw stuff with each other.
Do you feel like you've ever written something that you didn't want to share?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry to jump in, but there's just a whole host of people that you have to consider in your life when you're writing for something to be shared, especially in a subject like having a sibling with an illness or who has passed away. It doesn't just end there. It's not like a self-contained bubble. It's sort of a subject that connects to like every other aspect of your life, whether it's your friends or your family or your work in school or your mental health. So I think oftentimes it's not necessarily that I don't want to share information about Ben or about my emotions surrounding Ben, but more so that there's some kernel that it's connected to in my life that's still going on, and still is sort of unresolved, that prevents me from sharing that.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. Like, I think sometimes when I'm starting to write blogs, I think like, which one of my old teachers is going to read this? Like, all of my friends might read this, my parents, and there's certain people in those groups that it's like, maybe I don't want them to see this. Maybe they'll think of me differently. And I had started to write a blog for just a few days ago, the anniversary of my sister's passing, the 3-year mark. And I was going to talk about a lot of different things. I kind of was going to talk about my friends and how sometimes I feel like I'm posting so that they will reach out to me, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, they're gonna read this. I don't want them to think that they're not giving me enough support. And I just didn't end up posting it all because I was like, I can't share this and then have it affect them, even if it will help siblings,
Totally. I definitely agree with that. That's happened to me before, where you sort of, to some degree, you're writing something that is going to be public in some way. And so you start to tailor it in like the smallest little ways so that people have these realizations about you or your emotions. And it's really hard to sort of come to terms with that as part of the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
Is that about feeling responsible for the people around you? I mean, so much of writing is going deep inside of you and then looking at how you're responsible for other people. And I'm just wondering, as siblings, I think you have a heightened sense of responsibility.
I think it does. I think I agree with what you said, that we feel like we're responsible for how people are going to feel because of our writing, which probably isn't something that everyone feels when they're writing. But I think that as siblings, we feel that because it's something that we've had to like deal with our whole lives. And, at least for me, it's always been like, maybe I don't want to share this with my parents because it'll stress them out more. Maybe I don't want to share this with my friends because I don't want them to think this way. And I think that definitely can translate to your writing.
Yeah, I found that it's much easier sometimes to share your writing with a stranger than it is to share it with the people who are closer to you, because we have had so many experiences in our lives when we felt like emotions are already high for all of those people that we love the most, and there is sort of a responsibility to not make it any worse than it already is in some way. But I think the longer and longer that I've been writing, the more I've been trying to stop myself from thinking about those things and just write what needs to be written or write what I want to write, and then sort of deal with the aftermath later.
Izzy, how often is your writing really focused on some part of your personal experience in around Ben?
It goes through sort of waves. I think a lot of the times I'll leave it sort of untouched for a long period of time. I mean, probably 1 or 2 years of my experience here at college, I haven't really written about Ben at all. But then as soon as I start again, like when I pick the subject back up, it sort of consumes my writing process a lot, and then it becomes, okay, now I'm only going to write about this for a while. And I think it's really just depending on like how much emotional work I'm willing to do at the time.
And do you feel like it brings you closer to Ben?
I definitely feel like it's a way of continuing the relationship. I think it's also a way of understanding the relationship, because it was so hard when Ben was alive to step back and look at it, since there was just so much going on. And I feel like writing lets me slow down a little bit and, I don't know, just try to understand more about what was going on and how I connected to him.
If I'm writing about Blair, about something relating to Blair, once a week, then it's like I'm not going to forget that kind of thing. And I'm just like, if I'm consistently thinking about her and writing about her, then I think that that's something that like keeps our relationship like there in a way.
I find it difficult to write now without Benjamin. Like, for sure, that was my impetus, my inspiration, my thing that drove me to think deeper about what I was feeling.
It might be one of those places where it's sort of different for a sibling than it is for a parent, because I'm a young person, I'm having so many new experiences in my life, and it's in a way one of those grounding things to say to myself, how have my actions or path that I'm taking been affected by the life that I've lived with Ben? And I sort of revisit that thought every so often when like something new changes in my life, or I move on to the next stage or something.
Yeah, I think it's different for parents and siblings also, because I didn't write that much before Blair passed away, mostly because I was like so young. I wasn't like writing in that way. Like I wouldn't have sat down and thought, like let me write to express my emotions kind of thing. And so I can't really do that comparison as much of like writing when she was alive versus writing now that she's passed away. So I think that that's definitely a difference in siblings and parents as well.
Maybe as a parent, like what's your interpretation of reading something written by, one of your children or another sibling? What thought process do you go through, and what sort of questions come to mind?
Yeah, so I love reading what other siblings have written. And I love reading it because sometimes I think it gives me a little bit of a glimpse into what you and Noah might have gone through and that I might have been afraid to ask about when we were going through it. So I think that as a parent, we all crave hearing what the siblings are going through. I also think that siblings often try to shield their parents from the things that they're going through, particularly when they're going through it. I think that's your innate reaction to having your life just make as few ripples as possible. So sometimes we need to hear from other siblings as the parent in order to understand how to parent.
It's really helpful to hear a parent say, I want to know what you're going through or what you're feeling, and to have writing as a platform for that is really helpful, because it creates like a little bit of distance in a way, that's really easily negotiable. You know, I'm going to send you a document or hand you a piece of paper, and then we can both walk away and sort of think about it on our own. So just hearing that from a parent, that like that's something that you want or need in your life, can be really encouraging to a sibling who's trying to go through those things.
What would you guys want? Like, here's a platform, you have an opportunity to tell another sibling something around writing. What would you want to say to them?
I'd say, like, obviously it can be something that's very helpful just if you take like one event in your life or like one feeling and just kind of roll with it, even if you like don't think that you're a writer, or you like don't think that you'll go anywhere with it. Like, it can be really helpful. And like I said, I never really wrote when Blair was alive, and but it's become something that's really helped me express my emotions, so I definitely encourage it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really complicated, because I would want to tell other siblings that writing might not make you feel better, and it shouldn't be your goal that when you write you feel like it you know, it's fixed, that everything is okay now. But that oftentimes that's sort of the inadvertent consequence, because you're sort of creating more understanding of yourself, um, and that's important work to be doing.